It is time for our July reading wrap-up, and I'm very proud of myself because last month I managed to do 2 above my goal of 10 at 12 books for a total of 3,929 pages. So close to 4,000, it almost makes me a little bit mad. If you've been here before, you know how this works. I split up my reading wrap-ups into 3 categories of books. First, we go over the books that I call buy it books, books I thought were great, that I really enjoyed, and I think are totally worth the purchase. And then we go into what I call borrow it books, books that were fun, they were okay, but you know, we weren't like best pals forever, and I don't necessarily think that they're worth your money, but maybe still worth a read if you find them interesting. And lastly, we go over the books that I call skip it books, books that I think are just not worth your time. This month though is actually a lucky month, I guess, because we don't have any books on the skip it list, which means I didn't hate anything this month, which is pretty awesome. How this works is entirely up to you. If you just want to see the best of the best, just stay for the buy it section, pop on off onto the next video, or you know, make yourself a cup of tea, whatever you want to do. Or you can stay through the borrow it section and see what books are maybe on the edge that you should look out for next time you're book browsing. Without further ado, let's get into this thing and start with the buy it books, the best of the best. Let's do this thing. First up on the buy it list is A Part in the Dark by Anya Alborn. I admittedly hoarded this book, and I mean completely hoarded it, because I knew that I wanted to save it for when I really needed some good horror, because there's not a lot of good horror on my TBR this year for some weird inexplicable reason. So I was super in the mood for horror, and this, you know, peeked out at me from my backlog of TBR, and I decided it was finally time. So we are now best friends. I love this book. This is now my favorite book by this author. Now, to clarify, this book is actually a novella collection. It's 2 novellas. Both of them I enjoyed immensely. One slightly more than the other, but I think both were super, super enjoyable. But these stories felt somehow more real, and I think that's what made me love them more, is because they felt more connected to true life, you know, within the scope of being a horror book. So totally recommend this author if you're a horror reader and you haven't read her work before. She's really good. Next up are actually ebooks, and this is the first time in I don't even know how long that I have read on my Kindle, so it was nice to see you again. It's been a while, old friend. My ebook that I really enjoyed this month was one I rented from the library. What up? Go to your library. Libraries are the best. And that book was No Exit. Now, alright, I know that this was like a super popular book here on YouTube especially. Everyone seemed to be talking about it, and I, like usual, did not jump on the bandwagon when I maybe should have, but I finally got it. I finally read it, and I freaking loved it. That book was freaking fun, okay? I'm saying freaking a lot, but that's just, it's worthy of it, okay? In case you didn't hear about this book, it is like a horror thriller mashup, which makes it super fun because it's super fast-paced. In it, a young woman is trying to drive home to visit her ailing mother because things have taken a serious turn. She is trying very hard to beat a crazy winter storm that is coming up the mountains, and she unfortunately does not make it. Her car starts to slide, and her only option is to pull into this rest stop. She gets to the rest stop, the snow is already piled up high, there are a few other cars in the parking lot, and she quickly goes inside to seek shelter. There's a group of 4 already inside, and they quickly realize that this whole event is going to turn into one of those unfortunate but sometimes mysteriously intriguing moments where people, strangers, are forced together and they know that they are going to be stuck in an unusual place with unusual faces for an unknown amount of time. Everything is going about as you'd expect in that situation until our main character heads out to get something from her car. What she sees in the back of one of the other cars is something that should not be there, and she is forced to take action to become a hero, and we have to join her and see if she succeeds or fails. And it is just like a roller coaster. It is so fun. I really loved it. It's like a really good fast read if you want one of those. I thought it was super fun. Next up was an audiobook that I also got from the library. I was really on a roll this month with library holds. And it was Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. This is my first time reading by this author, and I am now obsessed, and I have requested her newest book, so you'll probably see that in a future video. In this book, we are following a mother whose daughter unfortunately went missing 15 years ago. Some news has developed in the case, and her body has been found. So this mother is going through a lot of transition, and for the first time since she now knows in some sense what happened to her daughter, she's able to try and move forward or start a new life and kind of start to let go of some of the hopes she had that she would see her daughter again. So super transitional, vulnerable time, and she happens to meet this man in a cafe just totally randomly. He kind of flirts with her and she kind of flirts back, and this is not something she ever expected, but it turns out that they kind of have this connection. Now this man has a few children of his own. He is divorced from his previous wife and he seems perfect. But when this mother meets this new man in her life's daughter, she realizes that this young girl looks almost identical to the way her daughter looked before she went missing all those years ago. So what ensues next is a crazy amount of interlinking connections and madness and craziness, and it was really a lot of fun to watch. I found myself getting kind of emotionally invested, more so than I usually do with these sort of like mystery thrillers, in the characters. I thought what happened to them was just so complex and crazy that it's almost like one of those things where you could believe it a little bit, because it's like when reality is stranger than fiction. It's not based on real life, but it was that convincing to me anyway. And I thought it was really fun, so if you have not read that, definitely check out Lisa Jewell, see if your library has it. And she has a new book coming out soon, can't remember the title, but yeah, just look her up. Can I just say, was it not a really good month? There were a lot of good books in here, and we're not done with the buy it section yet. So on to the next one, which was a little non-fiction that Sourcebooks sent me called Making Space Clutter-Free. I don't know if you consider yourself a minimalist or a clean freak, or on the other end of the spectrum where you prefer organized chaos, but my husband and I have sort of over the last couple of years gotten more into decluttering, or I wouldn't call it like strict pure minimalism, but definitely more on that branch where it's okay to let things go. And I prefer clear horizontal surfaces and all those sorts of things. I'm not like a newbie or beginner here, but I do think that this book would be really great if you are. It was also just kind of fun to have a refresh. I kind of like reading about what other people do. And I've got to say, it was really surprising how this book about cleaning your house was so psychological and about finding your purpose as an individual. It was really like half self-help book, which was so interesting, but really, really well done. And I very much enjoyed it. A quick, simple, approachable read. She breaks things down. Really great book. Next is another non-fiction called The Way Through the Woods on Mushrooms and Mourning. This book is a heartbreaker because of what it's about. This is sort of like a memoir, like a nature book memoir mashup. The effect was strangely wonderful. I really enjoyed reading this. It was a little bit of like a slower read for me, not because the book was slow, just because I kind of paced it out over the month. This is written by a woman whose husband passed away, and so in the midst of her grief she decided to take a class on mushrooms, which is something that they had always said they were going to do together and they never got the chance to do. He passed very suddenly and it was just a huge shock, and this was something she decided to do to just occupy her mind, distract her from her grief a little bit. And it ended up being this crazy journey that seemed to be connected to her husband's passing, her ability to celebrate the past but also move forward. And the effect of this book was just stunning, strangely stunning. Part of it is explaining about mushrooms and this funny like mushroom hunting culture, which was really interesting to read about if you're interested in like anthropology or just people in general. If you like nature, it was really fun to read about that different like subculture of interests and this cool little field that so few people know a lot about. But it was also tied in with these really beautiful passages that felt so honest and real and authentic about her grieving process. So if you are interested in that at all, definitely check that out. And it has cute little illustrations. I love the book like shape style itself, so just really nice read for me. Next was another audiobook, The Couple Next Door, rented again from the library. Can't stop myself. This one was pretty fun, on the edge of being like a buy it for sure and a borrow it book, but I still wanted to keep it on this list because I did think it was enjoyable. The setup is that there's a couple who are having dinner at the next door neighbor's house, and there's sort of like some odd social tension going on here. And what develops pretty quickly after the start of the book is that the couple's child, their baby, goes missing. So then we spend the rest of the novel trying to figure out what the heck happened, and as we go through that, of course, we are uncovering secrets from everyone surrounding this young couple and their family, and it's just kind of fun and dark. A little bit dark, not super dark. So it was a nice audiobook mystery to have it going in the background while I cleaned and stuff. It was a fun read and I did enjoy myself with that one. Last up on my buy it list is Recursion by Blake Crouch. Look at the shininess. Every time I show this book, I'm like mesmerized. Whoa. This is another book that is sort of on the edge of a buy it or borrow it. It was like a 3.75 if you want to be specific. But a lot of this book was really enjoyable, and I have to respect the craftsmanship that went into the concept of this book, which was massive and something that, you know, a lot of people would have the idea for, or something similar obviously, but not ever be able to execute it in a way that was manageable and enjoyable to read. So I've got to give the author mad props for that, because he managed to fit this crazy complex scientific-esque sci-fi concept into a thriller book, and he did it really well. So I got to give him props for that. My only notes were that it was a little too far on the side of believability, a little bit repetitive, and I wasn't super convinced of the love story, but that's not to say that the book itself wasn't worth reading, because I think it was. It was fun, and it was super buzzworthy book. So if you like to sort of keep up with what books everyone are talking about, then this is maybe one you should check out. That is it for the buy it books. Pretty good list. Pretty good list. That was a lot. Way more than usual on the, like, you know, seal of approval list. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you don't want to watch the borrow it list, that's cool. Drop me a comment below and I'll see you on the next one. But if you do want to see the few borrow it books left, then let's get into this thing. First up is another Kindle book from the library that was actually recommended after a question poll thing that I did on my Instagram stories when I was looking for horror thrillers. It was Into the Drowning Deep, and I have to say that I went into this book not reading the description. I didn't even look, just people recommended it and I thought, sure, okay, the library has it, I'll get it. And that was my only deciding process for it. I actually think not knowing what the heck it was about made it a more enjoyable experience, because I had zero expectations going in. However, I am going to tell you a little bit about what that book is about. It's essentially kind of like a horror mermaid story, where mermaids aren't these like pretty lovely things. They are terrifying deep sea creatures that will, you know, rip your flesh off basically. And while this book was fun to read, and I mean it really was, like, I was surprised by how enjoyable it was, but it's an enjoyable book in a unique way, where it's kind of like when you watch a movie that's definitely kind of a bad movie and you know that, but you don't care because it's still fun. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's kind of like watching the movie like Anaconda or like Alien versus Predator. Like, you know that it's not that good, but you also don't really care because it's just fun. It was like that. It's not a perfect book. Sometimes it definitely gets cheesy, like sometimes it goes too far. It's a little ridiculous at times, the science aspect, and this is coming from someone who is a biology major, and a lot of my friends were marine biology majors. So I mean, yeah, it's like definitely pushing it, but it's pushing it in the way that a lot of science fiction does, so I can't be mad at it. But it was still kind of a blast to read, so I don't know what to tell you. It was like a 3.75 star book because a few things kind of peeved me as it went on. A, it's really long, and the time that we spent on the characters was not always worth the time investment. And also a weird thing kind of happened over the course of the novel, where all the characters' voices, though they started out different and they had different personalities, all their voices kind of became the same. They would all have similar comebacks to different situations. So it was kind of like, you know, it was a little pandering after a while too. So not perfect, but you know what? It was still fun. I didn't really care that much. I just sort of took it for what it was. But not an amazing book. Fun, not amazing. Next on the borrow it list is something you can't actually borrow because it's vintage, it's nonfiction, and who knows where it even exists anymore. I'm sure it does in some places, but not anywhere you could easily find. This is part of a very long series. We have only 6 of the series. The series is about America, essentially, and it's little books like this one broken up into passages of time. So we have part of one group of time and part of another group of time. So I would think it would be so cool if I could one day find the entire set. I don't even know where we got these. I think we paid like $1 for 6 of them. There's a really nice little spine with the number, like this is book 26 out of, I think there's like about 100, I'm not sure. There's a list in the back. And this is a Yale Books book, the Chronicle of America. Let Us Now Praise Famous Men. That's the end paper. And I'm trying to read more of my vintage nonfiction. So this is one that I wanted to grab and read really quick. And I'm glad I did because it was super fun. So I wanted to show you some of the insides carefully. It's got a nice, you know, title page, and this book is from 1921. It's in amazing condition for being that old. So props to whoever stored this. And this one is about the passing of the frontier. So we're talking moving out west in America. We're talking cowboy culture. We're talking ranching. We're talking cows. We're talking like a lot of how the western and the middle of the US was first formed. Some of the past that happened there. It mentions the Donner Party. It mentions a lot about the connection between Mexico and America, and specifically through ranching and how that happened, all these rules that happened out west. He's really like passionate. He's talking about the frontier, this concept that does not exist in the modern world. I'm gonna read the first line to you because this guy like makes me laugh. He's like so into himself. I love it. The first line is this: "The frontier!" Exclamation mark. "There is no word in the English language more stirring, more intimate, or more beloved." There you go. That's the first line. He's really into it, and it was fun to read this guy from 1918's passion about the frontier, which would have been the generation before him. It would have been near the end of it, or the start of it, or in the middle of it. So it was cool. What was funny about this was that I loved it when he would reference technology. He said, "If you go by carriage or a modern motor car," and I was like, modern motor car? It's just weird. It's weird to kind of go back in time and read something that was about history but written 100 years ago. It's just very weird. Cool experience. I want to read more of these guys, and I've probably gone on too long about this, but just a cool little vintage book for you to enjoy that you'll probably never see. So there you go. Next on the borrow it list was an audiobook called One of Us is Lying, a YA mystery that didn't blow my socks off, but it was okay. It was fine. It was enjoyable. A lot of people seem to super love this book. When I posted about it on my Instagram stories, I got a few messages saying, "Oh, I love this book so much." I don't know if I'm just like too old and boring for it, or if it just wasn't for me. It was enjoyable, but the mystery, you know, it's young, it's a little obvious, it's not that interesting. This book is kind of like The Breakfast Club, but with a modern mystery spin. A bunch of kids are thrown into detention together for something they didn't do, and during this detention, someone dies. And so afterward, they're like, what the heck happened? They're all blamed for this, but they all are all, as far as we can tell, blameless. It's sort of fun to unravel that mystery. It dives more into the character dynamics and sort of like teen love and teen relationships, which I don't care for too much, and that's what I mean when I'm like too old and boring. I just don't like, that doesn't appeal to me too much anymore. So it's kind of like Pretty Little Liars, kind of like The Breakfast Club, wrapped up all together and put into this new thing called One of Us is Lying. And it was enjoyable, but I just didn't like super love it, so I think it's a borrow it book. Next was yet another audiobook, You Cannot Stop Me. I was a cleaning machine this month. It's The Breakdown by B.A. Paris. Now I have read one of their other books, Behind Closed Doors, which I read in like 12 hours or something because I was so addicted to it. This one is a lot slower paced, and that was kind of frustrating. It was almost like too long in a lot of these moments where I was like, we're just kind of repeating ourselves now. We're not moving anywhere. But when you finally get to the end, it was fun and worth it. The book is about a woman who is suffering slowly through this breakdown, and her mother has had dementia, so she's paranoid a little bit that she's starting to have like early onset. She's really nervous, and it seems that life circumstances are making all of that worse. She's buying things she doesn't remember, things are happening that she doesn't remember. She just feels like super conflicted and confused, and made worse, or like this is exacerbated by one night she's driving down this country road as a shortcut, and it's a raining night, and along the way she sees this car parked to the side. There's no hazards on though, so she's not sure what to do. She is tired, she wants to get home, so she pulls over to see if the car will like signal for her or anything. She can see sort of a form but nothing else, and after a minute she decides, well, you know, if they would have their hazards on, or they would have waved to me or something, so she drives on. The next day she finds out that that person in that car was actually murdered, and she feels such guilt about this that it makes all these other problems seem a lot worse than they maybe are. She is like so paranoid, and it actually made me kind of get some anxiety like reading this book. So it was still enjoyable, a good story, just not as strong, not as like fast-paced, not as entrancing as this author's other books. So still fun, still a borrowed book, but just not amazing. Last is a book that has been really like buzzworthy. It is Gods of Jade and Shadow. This is not a young adult book, and people are getting kind of like cranky about that because it seems like a young adult book, and I've read it, so I can tell you that yeah, it does seem like a young adult book. It's technically not though. According to the author, it is an adult fiction, but to be honest with ya, it doesn't read like one. It reads like a YA, and because this is a Mayan-inspired fairy tale, it's written like a fairy tale, which is usually pretty simplistic writing, as you can recall and imagine. I'm not sure like where the line is between adult and young adult, but yeah, to me it read like a young adult. So it's not like super complex. The writing is like very like a simple style, and that writing style actually kind of got exhausting after a while because it's written like a fairy tale, which works for shorter like short stories in a grim fairy tale where you're sort of like away from the scene. That works for a shorter story, I think, but when you put it in like a 320-page novel and you're talking in that cadence and that tone, you never really feel like you're connecting to the characters or what's really happening in the moment, which is a sacrifice of the fairy tale style, or at least how they chose to express it. So that was kind of a shame to me because you spend 320 pages with these characters. I want to feel connected to them in some sense, or connected to the story more. What it feels like instead is that you're kind of like watching a story through binoculars, like from far away. So in this book, the 18-year-old young woman accidentally awakens a ancient god that her grandfather had kept locked in a trunk. So it's kind of like a fun premise, and these mythical cultural elements really appealed to me. Like that was fun to experience, but I just couldn't ignore that distant writing style. It's not really insta-love, but it's close enough for me to not be super convinced by it. The book overall feels very formulaic in the sense that it's the hero's journey story. So you've got challenge A, challenge B, challenge C, and so many books are written that way, and it's a great way to do it, to be honest. But sometimes when it's so obvious, it can get kind of tiring. So that's another reason it felt like a YA to me. It's just sort of simple, just simple book overall. So I still enjoyed some elements of it, but I'm not going to go out of my way to really like super recommend this to people. So it's definitely a borrow it book. And that is it for my July reading wrap up. A great deal of books. 12 is a lot. I feel like I talked a lot in the last however many minutes this has taken. I don't even know. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed going over this with me. As usual, if you could let me know what book you really enjoyed or really didn't enjoy last month. Either way, I'd love to talk to you about it in the comments below. Before you hop off, if you liked this video, do me a huge favor and give me a big thumbs up. That really helps me out and I'd so appreciate it. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, but you like all things bookish, book reviews, hauls, TBRs, all the good bookish stuff, then I'm your girl. So go ahead, press that subscribe button, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye, guys.